So I'm going to speak to you as head of science at the Wellcome Trust, but I also, as Veronique says, I'm a scientist as well. I have a lab here still, so I know what it's like to be a scientist as well as I know what it's like to be a funder. I know what it's like to have, papers rejected and so on. So I'm with you. Before I begin, though, I just wanted to commend Veronique for all she has done here, actually, with respect to the open science that we have. I think the work we've been doing with GSK, AstraZeneca has been fantastic. So Veronique, thank you for that. And Frank as well, actually. Thank Frank, for organizing this meeting and for all he has been doing as well. I've worked with Frank for a long time, and I'm really very grateful, Frank, for all you've done. I'm going to just tell you one thing before I start talking about Wellcome and funding. I'm just going to tell you about Wellcome and science, because I think I just want to put what I talk about funding with respect to the science we fund. And about a year ago, we published the Wellcome's science strategy, and I just want to tell you what that is to put it into the context of what I'm going to say in a moment. So like all strategies, our strategy has some pillars. I think the Crick has 5. Wellcome Science has only 4. I mean, I do feel bad about that, but nevertheless, we have but 4. And those pillars are these. The first one is knowledge, is just making knowledge creation. Tim, you were saying that you weren't, I think, I slightly paraphrase, and forgive me if I got it wrong, you said knowledge isn't, and you're going to tell me that you didn't say this, knowledge isn't valuable unless it can be applied. I think you said something like that.
I tried not to say that.
You tried not to, but I think you did. Anyway, I must say I beg to differ. I think knowledge in and of itself is a valuable thing. It's a noble enterprise to get knowledge. And one of the things the Crick does, and one of the things I want Wellcome to do, is obtain knowledge for the sake of knowledge, because knowledge may not be useful right now, but it will be useful at some time. So knowledge.
Avoidance of doubt, that's the point I was trying to make very inelegantly.
Good man. Okay.
Much better said by Jim.
Good. Okay. So number 1 is undoubtedly knowledge creation. Number 2, it's called strengthening research capability. In an alliterative form, it's people and places. It's training people and giving them the best places in which they can work. And one of the best places they can work is, of course, here. The third pillar is called using knowledge effectively. And this is really why I'm speaking to you today. And if you follow me on Twitter or Wellcome on Twitter, you'll see that I tweeted today about my blog, which is about using knowledge effectively, and I will come on to that. And the fourth pillar is about creating an environment in which research can flourish. And actually, that's another aspect of what I'm going to be talking about. So really, I think pillars 3 and 4 about making sure that we use knowledge effectively and create an environment in which research can flourish, they are key to what I'm trying to do as head of science at Wellcome, and I know it's something that is also very important at the Crick. Right, that said, that's who I am, that's what I'm going to talk about, and those of you who know Robert Kiley, and I'm sure most of you know Robert Kiley, will be familiar with some of what I'm going to say, not least because I've stolen his slides. So some of these slides are indeed Robert's. And for Wellcome, as you know, has been very active in the area of open research. And we have a vision and a goal, and the vision and the goal are here. To tell you the truth, I don't always know the difference between a vision and a goal, but we do have a vision and a goal. The vision is a world where there are transformative improvements in human health, because research outputs are managed, shared, and used in a way that unleash their full value. So if you do an experiment, it'll be out there and it will be seen and used. In answer, for example, to the question about experiments that have failed, did you use the word failed? I can't remember. Failed. I mean, actually, experiments should not fail. They may give you a negative result, or they may give you the result you weren't expecting, but I don't count that as a failed experiment in any way, shape, or form. I call it a result. And I think that that result, albeit in inverted commas negative, should certainly be published. And towards the end, I'll be outlining how I think we should try to do that. So, a failed experiment is one where you drop the tube on the floor, in my opinion. And God knows I've done enough of those, but I don't publish those. We have a long-term goal at Wellcome to ensure that researchers are equipped, empowered, and motivated to make their research outputs findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Fair. And to use these outputs to accelerate research and improve health. So that's what Wellcome is planning to do. And to do that, Wellcome has its open research team led by Robert, who I must say I have huge admiration for. This is being live streamed, I know. Robert, if you're there. I think Robert has done a fantastic job. And the work that Robert's team has been doing falls into these three broad areas. One is things we're trying to drive that the community will lead, supporting researchers and innovators to develop and test their ideas. Because, Wellcome, we understand, as everybody understands, that the best ideas won't come necessarily from the funders, they won't come necessarily from the journals, they won't come from the people that lead institutions, they will come from the researchers. So we want to encourage researchers to have their ideas and let us know what they are and act upon them. We want to lead with respect to policy, and I'll be speaking about that as a second, and you've already referred, Tim, to Plan S, and we'll be mentioning that. And then funder-led activities, and I'll be speaking about, for example, Wellcome Open Research and the journal we have that will allow people to publish experiments that haven't given perhaps the expected result, have given a null result, but which nevertheless are very important. So, first of all, I'm going to speak about community-led activities and really funding opportunities. So if you are Wellcome funded, and those of you who have a lab in the Crick, I'm looking at you, Venny, you are Wellcome funded, whether you like it or not. And so you are eligible for some awards. You are eligible for a research enrichment grant of up to $50,000 a year. We have 4 rounds a year to take forward novel activities that will increase the impact of your research. So we want the researchers we fund to come up with ideas, and we'll give you money to see if you can develop those ideas. Open Research Fund, award to support international teams, once again to develop innovative ways of making research open. And then there's another prize we've just launched for reusing data. So this is all about Wellcome Trust giving money, making it possible for people in the research community, the active researchers, who are the ones who make the results, who get them out there, to have ideas as to how best things might work. So that's the first thing. The second thing is policy leadership, and this is where we have Plan S. We might speak about Plan S later. I actually deliberately didn't ask you any questions, Tim, because I thought we could speak after mine. So, but you know that there is a new plan. Have you all heard of Plan S? Yes. Anybody hasn't? Okay. So the key principle of Plan S is that after January the 1st, 2020, it says scientific publications on the results from research funded by public grants, funded by national and European research councils and funding bodies, must be published in compliant open access journals or on compliant open access platforms. What that means is no hybrid journals. No hybrid journals. So if you're me, I'm a developmental biologist, I am not in a position to publish in the journal that I used to edit, actually, development. So no hybrid journals, and that's going to be the rule from January 2020, and that's where, Tim, I'm sure you're thinking hard about this. This has been endorsed by 12 national funders, including UKRI, so the umbrella body led by Mark Wolpert, which includes the MRC, BBSRC, etc., and the EC and the ERC. Wellcome are going to be announcing their policy. We are going to be announcing our policy this autumn, and I can tell you that it's broadly in line with the principles of Plan S. Broadly in line. So you can take that to mean whatever you like, but broadly in line is where we stand. So this is going to be shorter than some of the other talks, Frank. I don't expect to see your 5-minute thing. If I do, I feel I've failed. But let me now almost finish with a few remarks about open research and open publishing, and then a few thoughts of my own developed from my perspectives as a researcher as well as a funder. So, open research. So, one of the things we are keen to emphasize and develop is that open research isn't just the publications you have in Nature, Science, Cell, and so on. There are many outputs that are important in your productivity as a researcher, and we're keen that when we review grants and applications, those outputs, and I call them outputs, are taken account of. So our application forms now ask for outputs, not just publications, and they allow citation of preprints as well. Preprints are not reviewed. They haven't been through the extensive review process that many of us will be familiar with at Nature. We allow them, though, because we flatter ourselves and we flatter the people who sit on our expert review groups and our interview panels that they can read and they can come to a judgment themselves. So when people sit around the grants panels tables, you know, they won't just say, oh, this is published in, you'll have to forgive me for a second, oh, this is published, you know, in Nature, it must be good. They will read it for themselves and they will you know, come to their own view. And I think that's terribly important. So we have made sure that we ask for outputs and we allow preprints. And you know about the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, of course, and we are members of that particular consortium. And I think there again, and one of my jobs is to prowl around the various interview panels and the research award grant tables. And what I do, and again, Tim, I'm sorry about this, but if I hear somebody say, oh, they've got a very nice paper in Nature, then I do make bloody sure that they've read that paper in Nature. And they're not using the fact that it was published in Nature as a proxy for the quality. So I do say all the time, and anybody who sat on a panel with me will know that I just don't let them do it. Because what's important to us is the research, not where it's published, and that's what's important to Dora. So I think that's an important point, and I emphasize this very strongly indeed for Wellcome. I'm going to finish introducing Wellcome Open Research. Have some of you heard of Wellcome Open Research? Some have? No, not. Let me say a few words. First of all, I have to tell you, it wasn't Wellcome's invention. It began as F1000 research introduced by the brilliant VTech Tracks, and I think VTech is one of the pioneers of publication, actually. He has had some of the best ideas that I've seen in publication. I think scientists, we owe him, you know, a debt of gratitude. So Wellcome Open Research is built on the F1000 platform. I don't like the word platform. It means, you know, computer thing. You can submit through a computer. And the way it works, I'm going to tell you briefly how it works because it's different from preprints and it's different from a regular journal, but I think it works really well. First, it's quick, it's transparent, it's reproducible, inclusive, and all those things you see there. How does it work? As a researcher, you have a piece of data, you have a series of experiments that you want to publish, so you write them up. You write them up in the format that will be, you know, like a normal journal, and you submit it. You submit it, the Wellcome Open Research team have a look at it. If you are a bona fide researcher, and it's a piece of science, and it doesn't have, if you're a bona fide researcher and it's a piece of science, it will be published, and it will be up on the platform immediately. People have worried, as they do with preprints, that people will start just emptying the notebooks out and you'll get tons of stuff going up. I must say that my experience of publishing on Wellcome Open Research or sending something to bioarchives is I've never been as careful before when I submit something, because I know that as soon as I press that button, it's going up there. So there's no space for, oh, we'll send it in now and the referees will tell us what to do. It has to be good when you submit it. And I think that's a positive thing about Wellcome Open Research and bioarchive that isn't often mentioned, but I think it's very important. So it's up there, it's published, and then the researchers will identify referees, and the team at Wellcome Open Research will send the paper out, but not literally, of course. The referees will be asked to look at it on the platform, and it will be reviewed. And the reviewing, as you probably can't see here, but I will tell you, the reviewing is completely transparent. So the authors know who the reviewers were. The reviews are published. The reviews have a DOI, so if you're a young researcher wanting to make your name, you will be able to put on your CV your reviews, should you wish. So it's as transparent can be, with, I'm sure, some attendant issues. Nevertheless, it's completely transparent. If you get, two ticks, which mean it's great, it's acceptable, publish it, then it will be transferred over to, just have one of those elderly moments. Frank, what do I mean to say here? It will go on PubMed, that's what I mean to say. If it gets 2 positives, go on to PubMed. If it gets an orange, you can revise it. The revised version and the original version will be online. If you get a tick and 2 oranges, then it will be on PubMed. So it's a way of, you get your research out there quickly, it's reviewed transparently, and then it's visible. So I think this is a very good way of publishing. And I sometimes think if you were reinventing the publishing process, which began 350 years ago at the Royal Society and hasn't changed much since then, if you were beginning publishing again, I would put the case forward that this would be one way that you would do it. The challenge, of course, is, is this a hint? The challenge is, for all of us as researchers, whether it's bioRxiv, whether it's Wellcome Open Research, or what, how do we know that a piece of work is interesting or not? How do we trawl through the huge number of publications out there, which in the past we've taken shortcuts and we have said, if it's in Nature, it must be good, it must be interesting. And I'm like many other scientists. I have my subscription to Nature. I read, not all of it, but I read it and I know that Nature will identify some really interesting stuff. So if we move to a brave new world of this sort, how would we be able to identify the stuff that's interesting? If it's in my field, I'll look at it anyway. But I would really like to know what's interesting in another field. I think that's one of the challenges before us, actually. And from speaking to Robert Kiley, and perhaps you've heard this as well, Tim, I think one of the roles of Nature, other journals, may be to identify those papers that are really of great interest, that may be groundbreaking, and will then be worthy of note. And I wonder whether, in some brave new world, that may end up being the role of Nature and other journals like it. So less as a publisher, because there's no need anymore to actually print the journal, but as a way of providing a sort of imprimatur. And I just leave that with you as a thought as to how things might work in the future. But for Wellcome, this has been a really interesting experiment. I've enjoyed publishing on it myself. It's been valuable. I get cited. It's out there quickly. And it's been a real joy. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Question for Jim.
Hey, thanks, Jim, and to all the speakers. My name's Harry, and I'm just getting my first month of my PhD, and I just wanted to ask a little question, because sort of from my perspective, looking up towards like my supervisor and other role models who have been deemed as successful in academia, they say, oh, I've published here in Nature and Cell and things like that, and when they're applying for their grants, these sort of things seem to matter in terms of being accepted and getting more funding. So moving forward, sort of like upward mobility of open research, how do you think it's best to approach it? Should I be thinking, okay, maybe I should apply more for open research papers like the one you've just mentioned, instead of aiming for the higher tier journals and things like that? I'm just wondering sort of the perspective of how can younger people look at the progression through academia in terms of what they should be doing for open research?
Well, the success and the careers of the younger people will depend on the attitudes of the older people. And attitudes are slow to change, I regret to say. I sometimes think, and if any of my colleague is in front of me, so I say this carefully, but I sometimes think that scientists are amongst the most conservative of people I have had the pleasure of interacting with. So I think that change will be slower than I would like to come. And I think the only way we can make change happen quickly is by initiatives like Plan S, by Wellcome and other funders mandating the approach that I've just described, such that when you come to publish, perhaps in an open access, perhaps in Wellcome Open Research, then we will have persuaded the community by then that the important thing is not to look at where it was published, but what the research is. But I'm in no doubt that it's not going to be trivial, it's not going to be a snap of the fingers, it's going to require me prowling around interview panels, telling people what to do. It's going to be difficult when the Crick, for example, recruits new group leaders, because I don't know how many applied in the last round of group leader applications. Venny may know. Hundreds. So it's going to be very, very difficult to go through these applications. But what I will say is that it may be more work to go through these applications. But in the spirit of equality and diversity, I think to look at these applications properly, to ignore perhaps those people coming from laboratories where the PI has been able to thump tables and make phone calls, I think by looking at everybody equally, I think that's terribly important. So, I think we all have a job to play here, actually, and I think it's the right thing to do. It may take some time, but I hope you will join us on the journey.
Hello. So I'm wondering how you want to tackle the problem of reproducibility as a funder and also as in your journal, and to actually acknowledge whether something can be reproduced or not, or whether it's a one-time finding.
So the reproducibility crisis, as it's been called. So the many answers to this, because reproducibility isn't a single problem by any means. Reproducibility can come over a range of different reasons, from dark grey or black all the way to light grey, as it were. The dark grey being data manipulation and outright fraud, and the light grey being genuine mistakes where you didn't realize what was going on. I think that the fact that we, in something like Wellcome Open Research, for example, you can guarantee that your work will get out there, that there's no need to big up the research in any way in order to persuade a journal. I'm hesitating as I say this, but there's no need to sex something up too much. You put it out there plain, and it will be looked at and it will be published. So I think that's an important part. I think there's another part of it that comes down to making sure that you describe the experiments as carefully as possible. We all know that there are differences, for example, if you do your experiment with male or female mice. Indeed, there can be differences if a man or a woman handles the mice. So there's a great deal to be done, and Nature have led the way in this, actually, with respect to describing the experiments and the reagents as clearly as possible. And I think that's a huge move, to really make sure that you describe in the paper precisely what it is you've done. And I commend Nature for that. That's been fantastic. We're working with Marcus Monifode. Some of you may know Marcus in Bristol. Marcus has set up the UK Reproducibility Network, and Wellcome are supporting his work. I could go on forever. There's no single answer, but I think there's a range of things that go from pretty bad to actually rather benign, where, in an ideal world, if you and I did an experiment and we got completely different results, we would come to each other and we'd say, wow, that's interesting. Why are our results different? and we go through it, and we discover that you did something one way and I did something another way, and that will tell us something interesting biologically. That,
Other way around, you could also establish as a publisher maybe a platform where people can actually tell, I could reproduce this result, because many people do this. Right?
yes, indeed.
Before
So,
they start something, a
yeah.
project, they first try to reproduce it, not to waste the next 2 years.
Absolutely.
On
So, Wellcome Open Research will allow you to do that.
any other questions?
So, just another discussion that we've been having with this group. So there's a new way of communicating, right, with Facebook and social networking and stuff that makes exchange of ideas very easy and makes sharing articles very easy. But with that also comes all the problems of kind of sharing articles that are not the best quality because they haven't gone through the scrutiny that a more serious publishing journal has. So what do you think are the elements that we could take of this type of communication sharing knowledge for science? And do you know any way of tackling that? For instance, commenting papers, sharing whether you could reproduce or not something in comments could be very valuable, and it's not done generally for other journals. But do you have any views on which of these elements could be interesting for the scientific publishing?
I think, so I'm not quite sure I've got all of your question, but I think the idea of commenting after papers is really valuable. And I think this is something that scientists don't do very much. If you look on Wellcome Open Research, or you look on other journals that allow comments from the readership, there are actually rather few. And I think that there's a need for change there somehow. And I think, to tell you the truth, I think that change will be driven by younger researchers rather than older researchers. I mean, I don't wish to hand all the problems over to the young people, all the problems created by my generation. I don't want to hand them all over to the younger generation. You know, it's bad enough having children as it is. But that wasn't what I meant, kids. But I think that there needs to be a democratization. I think I heard that word earlier on, and a willingness to engage that I think is more prevalent in younger researchers. I don't know whether one uses Twitter more. I mean, Twitter has got its ups and downs. I can feel my phone vibrating all the time. I think people are tweeting about what I'm saying. So I don't know, is the short answer. But I think that you know, openness and transparency are always good, and as long as people don't abuse it. It's a bit trite.